Alrighty then, so I just saw Avengers Infinity Characters, and overall it was good. I really, really liked it. I don't think it was amazing, but overall, it was good. It was solid. I'm happy with it. Now, first things first, I am not a huge Marvel fan, not by any stretch of the imagination. I respect Marvel. I appreciate Marvel a lot for what they do. I think that they've changed the way that we see movies and entertainment as a whole, for better or worse. Something that I really like about Marvel Studios as a whole is that they have a very ambitious, yet very concrete vision for how they want their individual movies to look like. You know, your Iron Mans, your Captain Americas, your Thors. But on a larger scale, they have a really good vision of how they want their universe to go as a whole, you know, in the overall grand scheme of things. And I'm assuming it's a very hard thing to do it as well as they've done it so far, because when you look at all of the other cinematic universes that all the other major studios have been making lately, oh my god, they're just so bad. That being said though, I still can't deny the fact that I think Marvel is nothing more than popcorn entertainment to me. Overall, their movies are really cheesy. There's a lot of boring filmmaking in all of them. There's a lot of superficial, emotional moments that always make me roll my eyes in almost every single one of the movies. Given Infinity War does a much better job at all of these things than other Marvel movies, say Black Panther, which is not a movie I enjoyed at all. So yeah, case in point, I'm not a huge Marvel fan, not by any means. I like Marvel, I don't love Marvel. But yeah, with that being said, let's talk about what I liked about Infinity War. So my favorite part about this movie is, ironically enough, what I always end up liking the least about superhero movies, and that is the villain. Josh Brolin does such a good job as Thanos in this film. He is evil, he is serious, he's evil without being cartoonishly evil. He's also oddly human, he's a little bit funny at times. Josh Brolin does such a good job in the role, man. He is such a talented voice actor. He's a very talented actor. I feel like Josh Brolin very much does not get the credit that he deserves. He's very, very talented. I also think that the visual effects artists did a really good job at creating Thanos, effects-wise. Apparently this movie cost about $300 million to make, which is an absurd amount of money, but I can only assume that a really hefty chunk of that budget went into creating Thanos, you know, creating him on a visual sense. I never really looked at Thanos and thought, this is a CGI character. I always just saw him as Thanos. You know, he always felt very real. He always felt very organic on screen. There's a lot of talented people behind the screens at Marvel. So yeah, I really enjoyed Thanos as a villain. I think Josh Brolin did a fantastic job playing him on screen, and I think the visual effects team did a really great job at making him look real. The structure of this movie was pretty strange, but overall I think it worked out pretty well, given the fact that there are like 200 characters in this movie. There are so many characters, but I think the script did a very competent and mature job at introducing the characters at really fitting points in the movie. Like, there are no less than 1 million characters in this movie, I've counted. But despite that, I never felt overwhelmed, I never felt like I was overloaded with characters. Maybe except at the end, but even then it still wasn't too much, and I would credit the overall smoothness of the plot to the structure of the movie. Honestly, I was really worried about going into this movie and then having to sit through 2+ hours of superheroes making things explode, and I would just be so bored and I would end up falling asleep in the movie theater. Much like what ended up happening when I watched Black Panther, honestly, but in Infinity War, the script and the plot did such a good job at cycling between exposition and character introductions and action smoothly enough to the point where I was never bored. I never felt bored in this movie, and that is a huge compliment because I always find myself getting bored in Marvel movies nowadays. I never felt bored in this movie. Avengers Infinity War has easily the best character moments out of any Marvel movie they've made yet. Dare I say it, there are some heroic-ass moments in this movie that really got me hype in the movie theater, and I am not the type of person to get hype in a movie theater. I saw this film on opening night in a very, very crowded movie theater, and I have never heard so many applauses before in my entire life in a theater. And I am not the type of person to applaud at a movie theater because, well, I mean, come on, but for this movie, I get it. You know, I honestly get it. There are so many great moments between characters that you expect to have good moments between, but at the same time, and even more unexpectedly, there are a lot of fun moments between characters that I personally didn't expect to have really good moments between. And I think that the first thing that comes to mind is Thor and Rocket Raccoon's storyline. That was a lot of fun, and I had no idea that was even coming. Chris Hemsworth and Bradley Cooper, who plays Rocket Raccoon, have a lot of really good on-screen chemistry together. I think that the last major positive that I want to credit to this movie is that it had a good sense of restraint comparative to how big it is. Like, seriously, this is the pop culture phenomenon of our decade. This is the Dark Knight of our decade. This is the Titanic of our decade. But even in spite of that, I gotta give respect to the writers for not putting all 1 billion Avengers into the same scene and then have it be an explosion fest for 2 hours. Instead, they got a lot of unexpected storylines, they separated a lot of the characters, and they gave a lot of the characters a really good sense of direction in the movie. A good example of a movie with no restraint is Avengers: Age of Ultron. That is a movie that just banked on having people want to see the Avengers on screen fighting next to each other. But what ended up happening in Age of Ultron is that because they just made it an Avengers orgy, it just came off as lifeless and really stale and boring and dull, and I hate that movie so much. It is just so ugh. Ugh. Speaking of restraint, I really like this movie's sense of humor. It's a funny movie, but it's fittingly not too funny. It's funny enough without taking away too much from the seriousness of the plot. This is something that Age of Ultron also did really, really poorly. In Age of Ultron, after every serious moment or whenever something serious happened, they had to undercut it with a punchline. And it made the movie really tone-deaf. You know, it wants to be taken seriously, but everything has a silly joke at the end of it. I didn't know how to feel when I was watching Age of Ultron, and that only made me feel bored as hell. So those are the particularly good things about Infinity War that stood out to me. Yes, I think every actor did a pretty good job overall, but none really stood out to me, you know, besides Josh Brolin. I think everyone just did well enough. I think the action was pretty expected, to be quite honest with you. I think it was pretty predictable. I think Spider-Man had some pretty good action scenes. I think that Doctor Strange and Thanos had one sick action scene, but besides that, it was pretty standard. You know, it was everything that I expected from a Marvel fight scene. But that's not to say it was bad. You know, this movie does very few things badly, and it does a lot of things very well. Alright, so this movie is not perfect, so allow me to quickly explain what I did not like about the movie. There's honestly not too much that I didn't like about it, but there is enough for me to complain about, so let's go ahead and do it. My biggest issue with Infinity War is that it gets progressively worse with each act. I think the first act is delightful and I have zero things to complain about it. I think that the second act is solid enough at setting things up in the third act, but I think the third act is so messy, I think it kind of falls apart at the end, and I think it's a little too repetitious for me. There's a little too much fighting, not enough substance in between. Not only that, they really tried to wrap up the movie a little too quickly for me. Like, the last 5 to 10 minutes of this movie is an utter train wreck. It is flat, it is really, really uninspiring, it's way too rushed and out of nowhere. It's really anticlimactic for me, at least. And unpopular opinion here, I did not like the ending that everyone is so sad over. Without spoiling anything, I felt like it was really cheap and it felt very out of nowhere. It felt very unearned, plot-wise. And not only that, everybody knows that what happened is not set in stone, right? Like, come on, it's so obvious what's going to happen. Another thing that I didn't like about this movie so much is that outside of Thanos, the visual effects get really bad at some points. Like, seeing Mark Ruffalo in the Hulkbuster suit honestly made me laugh out loud in the theater a couple of times. Another reason why I feel like I don't like the third act of this movie so much is because there is a battle at the end of this movie, which is probably not even a spoiler because you could see it inside of the trailer of this film, but there is a battle, and every single one of the background characters in this battle looks so cheap and fake, and it looks like they spent zero time putting effort into making these characters look realistic. And it's really disappointing because the first two acts of this movie, the visual effects are pretty solid to fantastic at points. I noticed this a lot in Black Panther 2, which is a movie that's effects are god-awful. I have no idea what happened with that movie. But Infinity War does it a lot better than Black Panther. The visual effects in Infinity War is much better, but at the same time, it gets bad enough to the point where it's still distracting after a while. There are some really silly character decisions in this movie, and the first thing that jumps out to me is something that Chris Pratt's character does at the beginning of the third act. And it's annoying, and I bring it up because it's such a huge plot point to the movie. And I don't know if I want them to write it more realistically, because it's a Marvel movie, they're in space, and they're fighting creatures, and Thanos looks like a purple Shrek, so I'm not asking them to make the movie more realistic, and I'm not asking them to make these character decisions more realistic. I'm just asking to make it feel more natural. I'm asking to make it feel more within my expectations of the character, you know, because Star-Lord is not a hothead by any means, but they conveniently made him a hothead for that particular scene. And it felt very jarring, you know, it made zero sense to me. Like, they seriously just had him be such an idiot as a plot device, just so they can move the story along. It's such sloppy writing. And that's basically it. Overall, I did enjoy Infinity War quite a bit. I liked it much more than I thought I was going to. And I think they did a very good job at handling so many characters so maturely and competently. And honestly, I think Infinity War might be one of the better movies that Marvel has ever made. I don't think it's the best movie. I think that Iron Man 1 is much better. I still think that Avengers 1 is much better. I think Guardians of the Galaxy 1 is probably better. I don't know if I like it more than Winter Soldier. I probably like it more than Spider-Man Homecoming. So, top 5, maybe top 6, probably no less than that, though. Overall, a good movie, though. I'm happy about it. But yeah, don't expect any sort of character development in this movie. If you are not a Marvel fan, you're probably not going to watch it. If you have not seen every Marvel movie, especially the Marvel movies within the last 2 years, you're not going to understand a damn thing. It is very unforgiving for people that have not seen the movies. But it's not made for people that haven't seen the movies. You know, it's made for people that are cult fans of the series and the franchise. And it does everything that it needs to, and it does everything that it needs to pretty darn well. And with that being said, I'm going to give Infinity War a 7 out of 10. A lot of you guys might think that might not be a good score, but that's a pretty damn good score in my book. With that being said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.